time to introduce my a new guest to the podcast. I'm a little nervous because this is kind of a professional style interview. Normally, I don't know if you listen to the pod, we talk about some weird stuff on here. I'll keep it pretty classy for you because currently you're working with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Mm-hmm. You've been training NHL hockey players for over 20 years, more notably guys like Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, a couple name drops there, watch your feet. But welcome to the Spittin Chiclets podcast, Andy O'Brien.
Thank you. Great to be here. Unbelievable show. I'm a huge fan. This is cool for me.
You listen to the show? Andy?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can get a little weird with it. I'm looking over at my producer,
I don't know about that. It's definitely over my head.
Get you fired so you start training the Spittin Chiclets crew. You think RA could do an Andy O'Brien workout?
I mean, imagine me if he could get me in an Andy O'Brien workout. I'd be a 10.
Just do wrist curls for about 6 weeks to get those bitch wrists going.
Yeah, I need to get bigger wrists. If you can help me get bigger wrists, then I'm sold.
Oh, well, he's not a miracle worker. Born in Charlottetown, PEI.
Yeah, that's it, PEI guy.
So you must just crush beers.
There was a point in my life where I did crush some beers. I don't think you could be from PEI without having that at some point in time. So
anyone I've met from that side can slam them back. But you played a bunch of sports growing up.
Yep.
Hockey?
Hockey, yeah. I played till I was about 20, so just played like Tier 2 junior hockey. And I mean, that's Canadian kid, it's hard to get away from that. And yeah, I was pretty serious into it for a while. I mean, it took me a few years of junior to realize that wasn't going to be forever. Wasn't going to have much of a career, and started to dabble in some other things. I was into track and field, competitive weightlifting, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so you always took your off ice seriously.
Yeah. It was just something I was always really interested in. Like, I was always interested in training as an athlete. So I love the training side of it. And when I branched out of hockey into some other sports, like a sport like track, for example, you're doing a lot more training than competing, right? Whereas in hockey, you're just playing games most of the time. So, I mean, I think I remember, it was different when I was growing up. I played AAA midget. We had a 28-game schedule. I think we had one practice a week. Like, it was a different type of an era. So I was really into like the weightlifting and the sprinting and the training and stuff. It was just always interesting for me.
You had to keep in shape because you only practice once a week.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
You started your career as a strength and conditioning coach at 18 years old.
Yeah, when I was pretty young. So I did that as basically like a summer job when I was going to university. So I think I was just at a point where I was interested in learning myself. I was still playing. And, I was kind of reading, writing to people. It was a little bit pre-internet. Like, the internet was just coming around. So you had to kind of like dig under rocks to find info. And you'd get like an NHL program manual from someone, and it was like gold. You'd have to save that stuff and pass it around. So, I was just into that. And then as I started going to school and learning it, I started training some other athletes and basically just doing what I was doing myself. And being from a small town, there wasn't anybody really doing that. So I worked with a couple of minor pro guys and some guys that were like sort of AHL, NHL, back and forth guys my first couple of years. And yeah, just kind of worked my way up, got some interesting clients, kept learning, and the rest is history.
When I used to come home from junior and they used to have the pamphlet, all the junior B guys would ask me so they could photocopy these workouts. And back then it was like power back squats, bench press, 4 times 6. And it was pretty basic, and things have come a very, very long way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's changed a ton. I mean, I actually I laugh because I've seen some of my old programs, and I was like a maniac. I'm like, how was I expecting anybody to ever do any of this stuff? But I think just like anybody, you start, I mean, I knew a fraction back then of what I knew now, but I think if you just have a passion for it, you enjoy it, you can have some success with it.
Where'd you go to school to study for this, or did you just take courses?
Yeah, I went to University of Western Ontario, so London, Ontario, another place where you can have some good times. So
I went to Frosh Week one time when you were there.
Oh boy,
that was my first ever college experience. I batted 1,000, Andy. It was a pretty good time.
Yeah, I could imagine Western would treat you pretty well. I had tears in my eyes the day I graduated and had to leave that place, but definitely a lot of fun. Like, tons of friends that are still my friends today. So like, great experiences at Western. And went, kind of just started training people. I was doing a little bit of work for like the Canadian Sports Center, just working with some provincial team athletes, and ended up after Western, I ended up in Toronto, and then I got my first job with Florida Panthers, and just kept working and kept growing, and now I sort of have a little combo of the private business with the team.
I dug up a little more info on you. You used to exchange VHS tapes with other trainers in order to learn. You said there was no internet access back then. Well, like to the point where it is now. Like YouTube hadn't been created yet.
Yeah.
And you used to have meetings with like training gurus.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was a different era back then, but honestly, it's I liked it in the sense that you had to think through stuff on your own. I mean, you just didn't have access to information, so I think that helped me become a problem solver, and I think that's kind of where I've carved my niche. Is if somebody has a question that's not that easy to answer, I like that process of trying to figure it out. Whether it's an injury, whether it's something where just the run of the mill everyday stuff isn't working for them, or they need something a little more customized. That's a little trickier. You can't just necessarily YouTube it, right? So that's where I really enjoy it, and I think having started early enough that there wasn't a lot of info around, it kind of taught me to think that way.
In one of the other interviews I was watching, you said that watching Rocky IV was your first introduction to sports on the science side, when Drago would be getting shot up and he'd be testing all of his strength in Rocky IV.
Yeah. Man, I fell in love with the training montage of that movie. I mean, I was pretty young, but I just remember watching it over and over, and I would play it and then go work out and then come back and watch it again. And I mean, I'm sure everybody has a story like that when they're watching Rocky, but particularly Rocky IV, where you had all the science side of it. I mean, I thought that process of kind of outthinking your opponent and discovering something that might give you that competitive advantage was pretty cool. Sort of equaled with the perseverance of Rocky and being that underdog story. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I would definitely throw in a few push-up pyramids after watching Rocky IV. Even maybe go for a jog. You met Sid when you were helping train at a local hockey school.
Yeah. I was doing so. There's a hockey school that I grew up going to in PEI, a pretty well-known school called Andrews Hockey School or Andrews Hockey Academy. A lot of NHL players came through there. Anybody from the Maritimes, certainly. And eventually I became an instructor and got to know everybody really well. And there was one summer where when I started taking the strength and conditioning side seriously, they thought maybe that'd be good to have me come in and maybe just talk a little bit or do a couple of classes. And that's where I met Sid. Yeah, he kind of saw my approach and saw what I was doing. And I had been hearing about him. He was a guy people were talking a lot about as a 13-year-old. He was playing with guys older and whatnot. And at that time, my passion was less on the hockey side. It was more on the training side, right? So, we had a real, we ended up connecting just so happened my brother was working in the same office as his dad, and Sid was real interested in meeting me, maybe doing a few more sessions, and we kind of got acquainted and realized there was a bit of chemistry there in terms of what he wanted to do and my style. So, then we started working together, and I think that first summer that I worked with him full time, I had started my business in PEI, and I moved to Halifax. And Halifax is kind of like the big city in the Maritimes, so everybody kind of goes there. And that first summer, he was my only client. So I think his parents would drop him off at like 8 a.m, and they would pick him up at like 2. So we ended up having a good friendship. We hung out a lot. We spent time together between our workouts and talked a lot about training, go eat together and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's a great way to train somebody because there's a real education process that goes with that, as you know, and that first process of just learning about everything, learning about the muscles in the body, why you're doing what you're doing. So it gave us a lot of time to dig into that stuff.
Oh, and you're just constantly sharing information on how to tune up. It's like be like a car engineer, talking to the driver, how do I fix this problem? I'm feeling a little bit, sluggish on this side, and I need more power in this glute.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I remember when I first, it was interesting, when I first started training as a hockey player, to me it was just about getting after it. Anything that was explosive or anything that was intense, I loved it. So I started out with a lot of plyometrics, Olympic lifts, a lot of things that just seemed ballistic to me, and my personality sort of favored that a little bit. But honestly, I'd run into everybody every once in a while, and they'd be like, dude, slow down. Like, you look terrible the way you move. Your biomechanics don't look sound. And I sort of learned as an athlete myself, there's the movement efficiency side of it's really important. And so when I started with Sid, that was in the front of my mind. I want to make sure when he does things, he does it properly. And I also didn't want him to get injured. I mean, he was a guy that obviously was this highly touted guy, a lot of attention. I didn't want to be the guy that broke him down or injured him. And so balancing off that ambition that he had to be a really good player with not breaking him down and getting him injured, it made me focus on like the attention to detail, and we just spent a lot of time coaching technique and making sure we did everything flawlessly. So it's a real cool journey for me because it made me better at my craft just being in a situation like that. So
and he's he enjoys the land training more so than the weights, correct?
You know what? A little bit early on, he definitely did. I think he's the kind of guy that, I mean, you know him. He's a big, strong guy that can put on muscle pretty easily. So I think
he has to change shoots in the off season compared to the season because his legs get so big.
He's got huge legs. Strength has never been really an issue for him. I think that part comes relatively naturally. I think, working on foot speed, acceleration, speed endurance, that's a little more in his wheelhouse, and he just responds better to it. So it's not that he doesn't necessarily like weight training. I think it's just more about what he feels he needs as a player, and he was always like real intelligent as a young player to know. I mean, how many 13 or 14-year-olds can sit down and say, look, this is the kind of player I am, this is my game, this is where I see myself going, this is what I need,
I was eating my own burgers at that age, man. Like, what?
Yeah, I know, right? Like at that age. So yeah, I mean, he was just to be able to have that kind of conversation with a kid like that was really cool for me. So, and then I think just him understanding what he needs. But to be honest, yeah, there's been times where we've gotten back to strength, and strength has been a little bit more at the forefront of what he's been trying to do. The game has changed a lot, so much, as you know. It's been more of a speed game lately, very much so. But there's been pockets in his career where, maybe he feels like when the playoffs are rolling around and, guys are leaning on him or the way teams are playing him, like he needs a little bit more upper body strength or he needs to play a little heavier.
So there's adjustments that in
constantly
depth about opponents and matchups?
Yeah, constantly. I think just always a reflection on the previous season, constantly trying to make adjustments. And so the training program, honestly, it changes every year.
Jesus.
And it needs to. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a nice problem to have when you're at the top and you're constantly trying to get better, right? But yeah, he's a pretty cool guy.
How long after you started working with him did you start getting that recognition where you were being more respected in your field? Because obviously there's you're the new guy on the block, and I'm sure some older guys are like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, pretty good guy to build your business around. Not only is he an unbelievable player, but known for his work ethic, classy guy. Like he's done the game, I think, a lot of good. So I've been so grateful to be a part of his journey. But to be honest, as a strength coach, it's actually harder when you come in that way, because a lot of other established strength coaches think, oh, well, here's somebody who probably doesn't know what they're doing, but they get all the accolades just by their association with somebody who's really good. So yeah, I got knocked a little bit in the industry. I had some people that maybe felt that any recognition I got or any accomplishments I have were all on the basis of that association. So, I had to put myself out there, talk a lot about my philosophy. I would give some presentations and some lectures and build relationships with people and establish my credibility that way. And it took a while. I mean, you definitely get attention, but I think I've noticed from every good player, they have their own process. Like most players that are at that level already at the NHL, they're their own person, and they're smart enough to know that just because something's worked for somebody else doesn't mean it's for them. And so, I think there's always a process of connecting with every athlete, making sure it's a good fit. There's a lot of good trainers out there. There's people that maybe work better with me than other people, or vice versa. I think it's a lot about fit and less about that kind of star celebrity trainer thing. It gets old, right?
Yeah. And then you started gaining more players that started coming in the off season, and you guys would be based out of Halifax at that time.
Yeah, I was based out of Halifax, and then we spent about 4, I think, full years there, and then I ended up getting the job in Florida. So I was in Florida in the winter, Halifax in the summer, which is a cool gig. I mean, good weather all year round. Then I started taking on, when I was working in Halifax, we had a handful of guys from the Toronto area. So I kind of had a few guys in Toronto, and they had friends and other teams. And so I started just having a little bit of a presence in Toronto. I had a few, chiropractors and therapists there that wanted to refer guys to me, and eventually ended up working in Calgary. So after I was in Florida, I was based in Calgary for a little while, but I always had this presence in Toronto, and there's just so many players there. It just made sense. Eventually I ended up moving there and opening a business and working there full time.
And then you get the job in Florida, and your first general manager is Mike Keenan.
Yeah, Mike Keenan. He was an interesting guy. I mean, I obviously as a young kid growing up in Canada, when you hear these big names, Mike Keenan, Jacques Martin, it was a big deal. Keenan was a very interesting guy. I remember my first ever training camp. He ended up. I think it was Nathan Horton. He had a grade 1 MCL, so it wasn't even a major injury.
Yeah, I played with him growing up.
Yeah. So he would have been in your area, right? So I remember not knowing anything about the landscape, the culture, nothing. I mean, I'm not coming from a minor league team, right? So I played a little bit of hockey, but didn't really know anything about the way the locker room works and the culture and the general managers. And I remember him just seeing me in the hall, and he goes, "Hey, kid, are you going to be working with Horton?" And I said, yeah, I think I start with him tomorrow. And
You're all
literally,
excited, all
yeah,
perked up.
Yeah, general manager's talking to me. He grabs me by the collar, pulls me in real close, and he goes, "You make sure he never wants to be injured again. Just make his life a living hell, right?" And so I was like, "Oh, geez, this is a good start, right?" So, but I mean, look, in hindsight, I look back. I mean, I understand, and actually, it's not a knock against Mike, because Mike, I really liked Mike. I thought he was like, he treated me really well, great guy. And I had a good experience with him, but actually, that culture like that, I was coming in at a time where that was just shifting.
Yep.
But there was this old school culture of, you want people to feel a little bit uneasy,
Yeah.
right? You want people to be a little bit scared, and so that immediate assumption that, okay, somebody's injured, he's obviously faking it. We want to get him back out there. We don't want him to get comfortable, right? That was a little bit of a shock to my system to get rattled like that. And I got rattled a few times, man.
And Nathan Horton's like, this guy's a fucking asshole.
Yeah, what's with this guy, right?
Andy guy, get him out of here.
Oh yeah, we had a prospect actually who was a goalie who came in overweight one time, and I remember Keenan, like literally, the guy came in and he weighed in, and Keenan saw the weight, and he started barking at me. He's like, is there a bike around here somewhere? Like, what can we get this kid? And so I said, yeah, I think we can get one. So it was literally about 5 minutes after the weigh-in, we had him on the bike doing something, trying to trim down. But there was an emphasis on the messaging around, just be ready, don't take anything for granted. And that was pretty interesting for me to come in at a time like that, and then to see it change so much in the last 15 years. I mean, it's come full circle with the way players are treated now, the way the culture is. But that old school culture is pretty interesting to me. It was cool that I had a little taste of that.
And on the flip side of that, Ed Belfour was there his last season.
Yeah. Ed Belfour was a real interesting guy. Became a great friend of mine, and so I've got some interesting Eddie stories for sure. I mean, anybody that knows him to be a great guy, and lots of stories.
So I heard a story about him at Leafs training camp. I don't know if it's true, where it was his turn to do testing, and they went and grabbed him, and they're like, "Hey, it's time for your bike test." And he looked at him, he goes, "There's no bike in my crease," and walked out. And that was the end of it. So I don't know how much he took his off ice seriously.
You know what? It's pretty interesting. The people that are close to Ed know that he actually was like really into it. Like, so crazy prepared. Certainly at the stage of his career where I met him, really focused. Total fierce competitor, like just really. And I mean, I remember one day he came in and said, my neck's a little bit stiff, and I was trying to figure out, maybe it was the way he was sleeping or like what's causing his neck. And he goes, "I think it was because I was sharpening skates till 2:00 last night." And so
he used to sharpen his own skates. That's
he just
right.
sharpen his own skates, and I remember times he'd bring his pads in. And he'd be looking at the pads and thinking about the colors and creating like deception to players' eyes when they're looking at the pads and stuff. Like very detailed. Would never, like, if I told him he had to work out 4 hours a day, he would do it if he believed in it. He was really into it. But one of the funny stories I remember, I used to text back and forth with Matt Nichol a little bit, who had him in Toronto, and Matt was like, "All right, you're in for a treat." Really, really interesting guy. But same as me, Matt would speak very highly of Eddie, and he came down, and I remember that the one thing, we had a conversation just about his posture and about the position of his spine, when he's doing various lifts, and especially as a goalie. I thought that was important. And from that point on, he literally was shirtless in all his workouts because he wanted to see himself in the mirror to make sure he had the right posture. Right. So I remember texting Matt and going, "Hey, Eddie loves training with no shirt, and he goes, "That's actually a new thing." He goes, "I've never seen that before." But pretty funny, lots of cool stories. But a great guy. We had that year when I was in Florida, we had the oldest team in the league, 3 40-year-olds. I think Gary Roberts, Joe Newendike, Ed Belfour, Marty Jelena was there, Roberto Luongo was there. We had some real interesting people.
If you folks see Eddie Belfour at your local YMCA working out with a shirt on, you can thank Andy O'Brien for that one. But I wanted to shift that focus to Gary Roberts.
Yeah.
Because now, like you, he's become a guru in the. Well, I mean, I guess all athletes, but specifically hockey trainers. He's one of the names that comes up. Him, Matt Nichol, yourself, and there's a few others. I know
Yep.
Gallagher's old man out in BC.
Yep.
Does a good job with a bunch of guys out there. But
Yep.
he was obviously crazy into fitness then, because that was post neck surgery, and he'd made his comeback, which is one of the most remarkable comebacks of all time. Ended up playing, I think, over 1,200 games.
Yep.
did you guys establish a really good relationship when you played there?
Yeah, we did. Honestly, I feel really lucky that I had Gary as a player. I've known him a little bit after, as a trainer and with his business and whatnot, but having him as a player was a real treat, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, I was a young strength coach, and he came in and provided a lot of leadership to our team, just the way he carries himself, and he was like a second strength coach in the way that he mentored other players and got them to buy in, and he supported me a lot.
That
so
helps.
It was
you're
huge.
the young guy, and
for
then
sure.
Old guys are stuck in their ways, or like, looking at you like, I'm not fucking doing that workout on the wall.
No question. And some of the older players were the toughest, but I had like these great veterans that were there. Robs, Jelena, Joe Neuendijk, one of the nicest people you'll meet. So, but Gary was ultra serious. He covered every detail, whether it was his blood work, his nutrition, his supplementation, his recovery. Really dedicated and legitimately impressive with what he did late in his years. I mean, he was a good player, right into his 40s and had suffered all kinds of injuries. And he was a type of player that looked at, paying money to have good experts in their lives as an investment. And, probably one of the real pioneers that had done it that way and got other players thinking about the same thing. And so, it was really great to have that experience as a player. I remember when I was in Florida, Gary got traded to Pittsburgh, and I remember texting Sid and being like, "Oh, you're in for a treat. Like, wait till you see this guy." And he texted me after a practice once and said he was doing jump squats in the hot tub today. It's like first time I've seen that, So he goes, I went to take a hot tub. Robs was in doing jump squats, so I just kept going.
That's what all the guys. Yeah. There was a point in time when people were doing jump squats out of the pool.
Yeah,
they
right.
Posted to social media, so maybe
I think because Gary used to want to be warm, right? And that was the thing is like sometimes as an older player you get cold, and so
you're talking to a guy who sat on the bench all game, and then the coach would say, "Hey, go out there for your one shift."
Yeah, exactly right. So sometimes he would get in the tub and do like some warm ups and some leg swings, and all just game face, the whole time. It'd be pretty funny.
So there's a story that when Gary Roberts got there, he tried to get a lot of the guys like on a nutrition thing, like on a specific diet, and I guess he caught Sid eating a piece of pizza at one road trip, and he like texted the trainer or the nutrition guy and like ratted Sid out. Sid had to like deal with the backlash of the fact that he ate a piece of pizza. Like that's how intense Roberts was.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he probably texts me too and is trying to get me on him. But
it's a picture of Sid eating the pizza, paparazzi style.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds about right.
So after Florida, did you kind of take some time off? Because, I mean, you didn't transition right into the Pittsburgh job, did you?
I took so after Florida, I had this opportunity to go to Calgary, and actually I'd signed a sort of longer term contract with Florida, but this opportunity came up, and it was just the right opportunity for me. I was in Florida. There's a bunch of pro athletes in different sports, so I was working with a relatively well known Olympic swimmer named Dara Torres. I shouldn't say relatively; she's one of the more well known female swimmers ever. Did some cool things. She swam in Beijing as a 41-year-old. She was like 15 years older than the next oldest swimmer in the team, won 3 medals and broke a bunch of records that year. She did some cool things. And then there was some football athletes, track and field, baseball, just down in Florida. It's a hub for a lot of athletes. So, I kind of got the taste of like wanting to branch out a little bit and do some other things. Great learning experience for me to start doing things outside of my comfort zone. So I was looking for an opportunity to do that, and this opportunity in Calgary to go work at a sports academy kind of afforded me the flexibility to be there and oversee things, but then come and go. Whereas at that time, having an NHL job is pretty restrictive. Like you kind of have to be where the team is, and wherever they want you to be, you got to be there. So it was. So I was in Calgary for a few years after that, and then I think I ended up in Toronto around 2013.
Well, and not only that, so at that time, how many NHLers had you accumulated as far as your guys? Probably 20?
Yeah, probably about I'd say a dozen to 15 maybe at that time that I was working with.
So over the course of a season, let's go back to Florida. So you're training all the guys day to day, so you got to worry about them. Then you got your guys calling you who are at this time all around the league looking for tune-ups in the midst of the season, need your undivided attention. And then also you need to keep up on updating your knowledge, because every day it's evolving, whether it's you're learning about yoga and recovery or strength here or mobility here. So it's just like how much free time do you have?
Oh man, I think there was one point in time in my career I think I worked 2.5 years without a day off. It was just, but it doesn't really feel, I say that to people and they just sort of look at me cross-eyed like, why, like, what are you doing? But But to me, it's never felt like work. So I've never had a day in my life, in my career, where it's felt like work. I enjoy it. And I think the best thing for, like, to your point, the best thing I've ever done was I've worked with some high profile people that have a lot of pressure on them. So as a strength coach, you just have to get results. And, that puts pressure on me, but it made me read those articles. It made me talk to people. It made me make sure that my craft was delivering on the responsibilities I had. So that's a recommendation I have to any young strength coach. Like, put yourself in a situation where it's not easy, challenge yourself. And I was lucky, I think, that once you work with one or two high profile players, they talk to others and people might want to try things. And so I was out of my comfort zone my whole career, always with somebody that had some kind of an issue that was a problem, or some kind of challenge that was new for me that had to make me better.
And I'm sure you practice what you preach, and that probably helped you kind of stay in line and were able to execute that 2.5 years. Because, I mean, I'm sure there's some times where if you would have been partying or having a little fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no partying or fun for me. I've got the, my logo should be the fun with the circle and the line through it. That's I think fun for me is my career, but if I'm training somebody in the morning, I'm in bed early, mindful of, being fresh and ready for that session. And that's just, that's how I enjoy myself. I had my fun when I was younger, and career rolled around, and that's fulfilling for me. So
then you get the job in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And I want to say your first year there, you guys ended up winning the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Man, it
was pretty cool. Yeah, it was pretty cool. At that point, I'd been working with Sid, 16, 17 years, and that was just cool to kind of see that side of it, because I'd never worked with him in season before. So that was really neat. And he actually had a tough start to the season
Very
that
tough.
year.
And I was going to bring that up. I was worried about him. I'm
Yeah.
like, this guy's not the same player. And then All-Star break hit. And then after that, he went on an insane tear.
Yeah, it was really, I think right around Christmas, he really went on a tear. And I think it's probably one of the best stories in his career. I think, obviously, he's overcome a lot of things, his concussion. He's had a lot of people doubting him since the day he was really young. But I think that was a really cool one, just because I saw the struggle a little bit, and I kind of saw, full circle what that environment's like. I think most players, when they come to Pitt and they're on that same team as Sid, the first impression is, man, like the stuff he deals with, the media, the stuff he's got to deal with on a day-to-day basis, the responsibilities he has as a captain of that team, trying to be compared to all these other players, and just there's a lot of haters, man. There was so many people.
There's people cutting out pictures of him, putting them in urinals at Flyers games. It's insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So I think to have that, and just to see him work his way through and get in the zone a little bit and have some success. And I still believe he's got potentially some of his best years ahead of him. I think his all-around game is as good this year as any other season, maybe better. We
stroke him off on this podcast every week. We're big Sid fans.
Yeah. He's just been a real privilege to observe over the years. He's an incredible athlete. I think the greatest athlete in certainly that I've ever worked with, and a good human being too.
And another reason I'm sure for this year's success is last year is really the first year he hasn't won any league awards or a championship. So, I'm sure he took this off season pretty seriously.
Oh yeah,
like he always does. But this one, I've heard through the grapevine that he was extra amped up to get after it this off season.
Yeah, there's no question he always is. After, it's pretty interesting. The one summer that was, he's had a couple of real big summers where he just, everything's clicked or gone well for him. But the one summer was real interesting, is between the 2 cup runs, and then you had the World Cup. It was neat because, he finished so late, it was almost, and the World Cup was kind of starting early. It's like, why not just turn this into all one big season?
Really?
So it was almost a different type of a summer, and I think he had a real springboard coming off that one. But it's a lot of hockey. We played as a team more games than any team in history in those 2 years, and then the guys that are at the World Cup are adding games on top of that. So it is a lot of hockey, and so I think that following summer was a challenge, trying to unload the body a little bit. And last year it was good because we finished a little bit earlier, so it was actually a time to take that summer and just kind of really get after it and use the time that he had. So he certainly did that. I felt that last summer going into training camp, it was the best physical condition I've seen him in, probably the leanest, and I would say probably the best overall physical condition of his career last year going into the season, in my opinion.
We've talked a lot about Sid and what he's accomplished through your help, but this is from Rick Tocchet, by the way. Your single biggest accomplishment was getting Phil Kessel to stop drinking Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever he drinks.
Oh, man. I think, hey, listen, as every bit as privileged as I have been to work with guys like Sid, I mean, being on a team that Phil Kessel is on, that's a treat. That's a treat. I mean, that's, I wouldn't trade anything for that. I love Phil to death. I mean, he's an unbelievable guy. Entertaining, as you can imagine.
He's always whining and complaining, but it's kind of his shtick too, right?
Yeah,
he plays into it.
Of course. I honestly, I really like Phil. I think and obviously Rick had a great relationship with Phil too, but honestly, Phil has this reputation, but I think he's a little more dialed than people realize. I don't think he likes to advertise it or announce it.
There's been a few incidences where it probably doesn't look great, like the hot dog situation at the Olympics. And
yeah, exactly.
Just wrong time, wrong place, wrong time for Phil Kessel.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the best Phil story about the Coke was when we were. We had tried as a staff. We said, look, if we just eliminate, pop. I mean, this is what we, this is our goal. And I think honestly, it lasted like maybe 1.5 games, like maybe 4 periods, and then he's just like, I don't think I like this. And I think he decided to have a pop, and he scored on his next shift when he went out there. So we were done. But no, I think honestly, he's been pretty mindful, man. I think he works with Gary Roberts in the summer. Gary's had a really good influence on him, and that's really helped us. And I think we have a good environment for him. Like, we have a lot of healthy options around, and just a great guy. He's been really fun to work with, and actually, I think he's done pretty well on the off-ice side of it. So.
I got to go back a little bit. You were with Steve Montador in Florida and ended up establishing a great relationship with him. A difficult story. He ended up, passing. You guys kind of created this summer camp in Vail. I want you to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, that so the camp we've been doing for quite a while now. I think the first year we had nine players. Now it's a good portion of my clients, but we get requests and probably have a waiting list every year of elite guys. So it's been a really cool camp. It started actually the two guys that kind of got it going. The concept was Marty Jellin and Ed Belfour, actually. And the whole idea was, it's a bit of a shit show around the rink pre-training camp. Like, everybody's there. It gets a little watered down. The quality of the skates aren't great. It's not overly organized. Families are getting back in school. So just wanted to go away and just isolate yourself and just focus, get ready mentally and physically for the season. So we decided to pick someplace high altitude to do that. And Steve was the kind of guy where if you're doing something, he's in. And that was the cool thing about Steve. And if we needed tee times, he's got them. And if we need extra guys, he knows who he can bring. And
he's the glue guy.
He's the glue guy. And he was, dinners. I mean, stories at dinner. Like, he was the perfect guy for a camp like that. He just made, everything was fun when Steve was around, and people gravitated to him. And I mean, he was a bright guy. Like, I remember we went to visit one of Eddie's friends, who was this, like, billionaire guy up at the top of Bachelor's Gulch, a really cool area up there. And Steve is talking economics with him, and he could rub elbows with anybody. Very charismatic guy, very caring. And it just, that was kind of became what the camp was about, So, unfortunately when Steve passed, I think we've tried to honor his legacy a little bit, his relationship to the camps. We have a trophy named after him and stuff now. And, I've worked with Steve probably for about 10 years. Super fit guy. 1 year in Vail, we had this, we did a hike a few years, actually. And, the 1 year we drove up to the top of the mountain and hiked the flat part because we thought it'd be a little easier, but we were hiking around a lake, and the hike got, a little bit competitive. A few of the guys started running and actually, kind of racing a little bit. So Steve was way up at the front. And the only difference with him, he had this big backpack, and nobody else had a backpack, and he was right at the front. And then he had this camera on him, and he saw a bear, and he actually went off the trail for a bit, probably 5 minutes, to try and get a picture of this bear. Came back, and then he was at the back of the pack, and then actually went back to the front and still won that that kind of hiking race that we had. So there was a point in time where, man, I would put him right up there against anybody in terms of the best conditioned player.
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
How many guys towards the end, or even now, do you have? Like 20, 25 guys go there?
Yeah, we can only have like 24, and I think that works out, to be perfect. We end up having 12 guys plus 2 goalies per team, and that just ends up being the right numbers. We've established like a rule book for the camp, and it gets real competitive, and now it just kind of ends up being that's our number now.
Have you ever had to kick anyone out because they're not taking it as seriously as you guys would like?
Usually the opposite. Usually we got to try to calm people down because there's like legitimate players start hating each other at the camp sometimes.
So I've seen some one-on-one battles between Marchand and Sid, and they end up getting online. Were those taken at the Vail camp?
No, actually, Marshy's never been there. Yeah, I don't work with Marshy, but I know him really well. He's in Halifax, and my brother coached him and stuff. And obviously, Sid and Nate and those guys in Halifax skate with him in summer. But he's not an athlete that I worked with. We have done a camp in Halifax. We've done a couple camps there. One of them was a World Cup kind of prep camp for the last World Cup, and so Marshy was at that. We had some good players down there, so it might have been at that camp that was going on.
Yeah, the chirping gets elevated when Marshy shows up.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
I want to ask you, who's been the most rewarding athlete you've had the opportunity to train, where maybe you got a hold of them and you're like, oh my God, this is a mess. This is like an old car. I gotta soup up from scratch.
Yeah. In terms of that, I think honestly, there's definitely probably I think any strength coach will tell you that it's not necessarily the most talented athletes that you enjoy working with the most. It's the ones that are just the best people, the ones you form really good relationships with. And if somebody can be vulnerable with you, so that they can let you into their struggle a little bit and let you just be that role for them. I mean, that's kind of what it's all about. So honestly, man, it'd be hard to single one out. I've had many. I think just a guy like Steve Montador stands out a bit because he had some struggles, and there was a lot going on in life and hockey, and I think he went through some things where he used his training to sort of springboard a healthy obsession, and his training and his nutrition kind of became that thing that was his new kind of focus, and that helped him in different stages of his life, and he was real open about that. And so yeah, anytime you can form relationships with people that way, I think it makes a big difference. But yeah, there's definitely some athletes I've worked with that maybe a lot of names people probably wouldn't even know, just weren't NHL players, but great people. And if their goal was to get a scholarship or their goal was, just to overcome something that they've had. I work with some athletes with major injuries that maybe nobody thought they would get back, and they ended up getting back. So yeah, there's a bunch that stand out, but Monty's name probably goes to the top.
You briefly touched on the period of time when Sid was out with the concussions. Being that close to him and kind of maybe being even a little bit helpless, how difficult of a time was that for not only him but yourself?
Yeah, I think I definitely felt for him. I wouldn't say necessarily hard on myself, but I mean, I think the hardest thing for me was just knowing like hockey's this guy's life, right? And I mean, he loves the game, and so that, and I don't think he ever felt this, or certainly never said anything to me, but I think just being in that state where, I mean, there's that injury there's so much uncertainty around it. So I think anybody that goes through a concussion, I mean, that's on your mind, and when you're not skating and you're not training, or you try to do that and it's not going your way, I mean, it's a heavy thing to go through. And actually, when I went through it with Sid, that was the first time I'd really gone through that. It was a big educational process for me. I'd travel with him a bit and talk to some different experts and learned a lot about just neuroscience and brain health and concussions and how they work. But then since then, I think because I'd been through that with him, I'd had different people reach out to me and just say, hey, I'm stuck. I've talked to everybody. Can you share with me your experience? And that's kind of become a little bit of a niche of mine, just talking to people and help them sort through the various experts that are available and maybe how they can tick a few boxes to make sure that they're covering all their bases. So that was an interesting process. The media is everywhere. So, I mean, there was times where we went down to LA for a while to train just to kind of get away, So, but honestly, there's some. So I remember this time, and I'm sure Sid doesn't love me telling stories, but this is one I think he wouldn't mind. I remember there was a time when we were working together during his concussion, and my sister was getting married. So we were in Halifax, and we had to go over to PEI. And I was, he didn't really want to miss his workout. So and he's got family in PEI, and I said, look, I'll go over. We'll do our workouts there while you're there for a few days, and it's all good. So we drove over, and I remember I was staying at one of my buddy's cottages, and we went and did a workout on the beach, and then we're getting ready to drive back over to Halifax, and I had to like jump in the shower, and I had something to do, and I came out, and he had cleaned the place that I was staying in, like head to toe, like did all the dishes and got everything done, and I was just like, man, this guy's like about as humble as you can get. He's just about as regular,
salt of the earth,
and salt of the earth, dude. He's just my friend at that point in time, right? And to do a gesture like that, I mean, it's so easy, I think, in today's world with social media and things to let things get to your head and to develop an ego. And I understand with a lot of athletes, they have so much pressure on themselves, they got to worry about themselves. But I remember actually, like, as well as I knew him, taking a step back and be like, man, I'm so grateful for this guy's friendship. And, he's in this stage where he's battling through this concussion. He has the time to think about other people. And I remember him being excited about my sister getting married and thinking that was really cool and stuff. So anyways, yeah, I think the thing I noticed through that experience was I felt for him for sure, but it made me appreciate just the character he has and the quality of person he was.
Damn, that's deep. Maybe some of our Flyer fans, listeners, might start to appreciate it. Maybe the booze will get lower just a little bit.
They'll come around a little bit, right?
Oh man, I went to that outdoor game this year, and they just want him so bad.
Oh, they're vicious.
Yeah,
they're vicious.
We talked about how you have to constantly, add to your bag and learn about all these new advances. CBD.
Yeah.
Is a new one that's on the scene. I got introduced to it probably about 6 months ago, and it's helped me a ton. I've obviously suffered some concussions. I don't know if you ever watched me play.
Yeah.
Not much stick handling going on, just more eating punches. But just not only for the mental side of it, but I mean, I've had both my ACLs torn, and I've been using it. And I guess we can take the time now. We've actually teamed up, and we're going to launch a brand called CaniBrands, and it's going to be a CBD and THC company that's basically implemented into products that can benefit your lifestyle, whether it be sleep aids, whether it be recovery products. We're going to go as far to develop recovery drinks and those sort of things. So if you could just touch on what CBD does and where we're going to go with it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been a little process for me. I think my interest is always on the scientific, the science behind stuff and why it's working. For me, the curiosity that I have is always to understand things. So, for me, it's like, okay, well, if something's working, why is it working? What's going on? And so, the process to understand that, whether it's a piece of equipment that you have to look at, whether it's a training concept or a modality or a supplement or a nutraceutical product or something like CBD, is you start by hearing certain things, and then you want to have a read on maybe the science, the physiology behind it. You want to talk to people who've used it. There's this whole process of trying to learn that, and it's not always just about the research. That's a part of it. It's a big part of it is honestly talking to people and their experiences. And I think as a strength coach over the years, you have to have this really good intuition on how to sort through what is legitimate and what isn't. And when you start to hear multiple people, talk about a product, it forces you to take a look at it. And so it came on my radar, and I obviously am aware of what's going on in the industry, and that a lot of really credible companies are putting a lot of money into this. So they're doing their homework and their due diligence. And then I start talking to people who are using it, and then I started using it myself. And then it's okay, well, now I need to learn about the endocannabinoid system and understand why it works and what are those theories, and then read the existing research that is there. And then I got to understand the sourcing, and then I got to understand the dosing. And so it honestly, it's a deep dive, right?
Can we take a break here, Darrell? My head's going to explode.
It's kind of this one step after another. And so what I can say, because I've had people ask me like, why this, what are you doing? I never affiliated myself with a product before in my 20 years, but I've been involved. I love supplements. And I loved, product. And so probably the reason is as you start doing these deep dives and you go into research and you look at the anecdotal side and you start trying things, honestly, most products only get so far, right? So you will find some, okay, well, there's some research and theory, but honestly, it doesn't work, or it only works at this dose, and that's not a realistic dose, or it only works for a short period of time. It was the first thing that just it kind of passed every stage that I got to, and the more people started to try it, the less it was hype and the more it was legitimate. And so I just realized, okay, this is something I need to understand. And getting involved with a company like CaniBrands not only is, it's fun to add some value, but it's also a great opportunity for me to learn because it gives me connected to product formulation and gets me connected to other experts and people who've been around the product. And so right now, I mean, the typical thing that comes across my radar, players will say, look, I want to try this. I've heard other people say it works. From what I understand, it's safe. And so I want to try it. But like, where do I get it? Which product do I buy? And how do I dose it, right? Because most players are like inflammation, check, sleep, check, energy, check, focus, check. I want it all, right? But how do you dose it? The way you dose it for focus might be a little different than the way you dose it for inflammation, or the way you dose it for sleep might be a little bit different. And then the things that you combine it with might be a little different. And then the way one person doses it might be a little different than another. So I think having all those conversations, to really try to understand it and try it is kind of where we're at right now. But as far as it being an effective product, there's a little bit of research out there. By the standards of a lot of nutraceutical products, there's actually a lot of research, but and there's a lot of information on a scientific level, but the research is still mounting. But the anecdotal evidence is through the roof on this product. I've never really seen a supplement or a nutraceutical product that quite compares to CBD in terms of,
and it covers so many
different things.
It's so broad. I mean, you're
sure.
talking about guys using Ambien, to fall asleep after like a long flight and different time zone change, or, maybe they're having a little anxiety and they can't get to sleep because they haven't been playing great and they just got pee-pee whacked by the coach, right?
Yeah, of course.
That's a term we use on the podcast, pee-pee whack. I don't know if it's...
Heard that one once or twice.
Yeah, I don't know if it's up to 2019 standards, but, I use it for sleep, for a sleep aid. I mean, I was telling people on the podcast that I've been sleeping so well, sometimes I even wet the bed, and when I wake up, I'm like, well, I didn't even wake up halfway through the piss. I actually wet the bed. I had to get plastic sheets. So this stuff's actually costing me some money.
Should we add bed wetting to the list of side effects, or is that?
I mean, that's not a bad side effect. I mean, it's an expensive side effect if you don't have plastic sheets, right, Grinnell? Well, actually, Grinnell had the leak in his roof, so he actually needs plastic sheets as well. Grinnell, do you have any questions for Andy?
Off the top of my head, no. But I think if you come back to me in 5 minutes, I will.
Okay. All right. Well, if we're still going.
Well, and one thing I can chip in on the CBD oil. So let's say you just take sleep, for example. That's a primary spot. I mean, obviously, hockey players, any hockey player will tell you, playing games at night, the stress you have, the stimulation of your central nervous system at night, it gets difficult to sleep. And there's a cumulative effect of that. And the more you get wound up and the more it affects your circadian rhythms, the worse it gets. But then, honestly, just talk to anybody, not a hockey player. Just like a lot of people have issues with sleep. So the one study that had been done with CBD and sleep, they looked at a couple of different things, quality of sleep, and they looked at the sleep architecture, so the different basically stages that you're in, and they looked at 3 different doses, 40 milligrams, 80 milligrams, and 160 milligrams, and what they found was in all 3 doses it improved sleep, and they found that as you increase it, it increases the magnitude of the effect on sleep. So that's called a dose dependency. And then it also showed that it increases the amount of deep sleep that you have. So when you have these stages of sleep, you have light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. And when you deplete somebody of REM sleep, a lot of people, so surprisingly, some of the sleep experts have found that this doesn't do a whole lot. Like, it doesn't inhibit your cognition. Like, it doesn't have as much of a profound impact. But when you inhibit deep sleep, it's a big problem. So a lot of the sleep experts nowadays have put a lot of emphasis on deep sleep. That's where you get a lot of your repair and regeneration. So that's where some of the positive stuff about CaniBrands. And then, of course, the fact that it has been used as an adjunct or a replacement from some of the traditional pain meds and anxiety meds and different things. They're using it with people that have a diagnosed illness, and they're finding maybe it's a safer, better tolerated thing, and better sleep just seems to be this sort of secondary consequence. But if you talk to, I mean, my dad, had tried it and used and found that he slept through the night. I mean, it was 5. I think he'd said usually he wakes up a little bit more, but slept through the night with it. I've had quite a few people that aren't athletes that have just shared like great experiences with it. So, pretty neat. And
that's
to
just
see
the
around.
sleep category.
That's
we just
just the
covered.
sleep.
We got way more than that.
Inflammation, and I mean the endocannabinoid system. Probably the best way to explain this. Most either not all supplements, but most drugs, they're going to bind to a receptor and do something very specific. That's the mechanism. This is actually not binding to the receptors in the endocannabinoid system. It's actually facilitating influence. So the best way to explain it is it has the ability to assist your body do what it's trying to do. And so it is not going to necessarily, knock you out and make you sleepy. But if your body's circadian rhythms are trying to wind down, it can facilitate that, and that's how you're getting a product that helps with sleep and wakefulness, right? Because if you take it during the day, it can enhance your energy.
Oh, I find that it sometimes I don't even need to eat as much.
Yeah.
Has that been a common?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that endocannabinoid system, I think the scientists are. I mean, certainly, I don't tout myself as an expert. This is how I explain it, but a lot of people are still understanding that system, but it affects immune function, sleep, circadian rhythms, appetite, all kinds of different things. So we know it's facilitating influence on that system, and the effects seem to be really positive and safe. So I think we're going to learn a lot more in the next couple of years, I'm sure.
Appetite suppressant is the word I was looking for, but
yeah,
that's outside of my word range. Oh, Mikey's got a question.
Yeah,
I do. So in regards to the recovery aspect of it, do you think that CBD is something we'll see in NHL locker rooms like heavily in the next 5 or so years?
Whether you see it in the locker rooms, like right now, we have a mandate to use only NSF certified products in the NHL. That's how it works. So it's not something that we can supply our players. So it's something that if players choose to want to use it, they can. But they sort of use it at their own risk and they use their own discretion. I think that's why it's important for companies like CaniBrands to emerge that are credible and what's in it, where the sources are coming from.
Do you think the NHL will change that rule though going forward so they can?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. I there's no question. I think the value is there for them to take a look at it. I think that right now, because the NHL crosses so many different states, there's, I don't know who's making these decisions necessarily on behalf of the NHL, but they have a lot of things to consider. And so, in terms of all these decisions, but we know that CBD oil has been approved by WADA. So sort of the international Olympic level athletes are able to take CBD. It's been approved for use in sport. So when you get something that's sort of got the green light at that level, typically it does transcend into the team sports and it kind of gets approval. So CBD, kind of exists on that side where it's getting looked at pretty favorable in sports. And I do think the application is huge for hockey, both from a performance standpoint and from a player health standpoint. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, I think we can wrap things up, but I want to thank you for stopping by, taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you guys just had a game in Dallas last night. Yep. That was a big win in the third period. Huge. How about that pickup, McCann, at the deadline, or close to the deadline?
Great guy, great player. He's fitting in really well with us. He's been awesome. Great. His goal last night was pretty sick.
Any other funny stories about Penguins guys right off the top of your head? You got any Talkett stories?
Oh, all kinds of Talkett stories, man. This guy's pretty interesting. I mean, watching him on the ice giving players tricks on how to practically injure other players and get away with it. He's like the master at that.
Well, they got face-offs, like do a little something. Like Shane Doan used to teach me these little tricks all the time, just to maybe get the guys' focus away from the game for a split second, and that's really all you need.
For sure. But like honestly, those little tricks of the trade that players had in his era, like how tough would he have had to have been to be the type of player that he is? I mean, it's crazy.
Well, that's why I mentioned Gary Roberts. I mean, before his injury, he was probably set to be the best power forward of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, he had over 200 minutes in penalties, and he had over 50 goals the 1 year.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was doing that pretty consistently. But yeah, like back then, it was medieval times, dinner and tournament every game.
It was a rough game, so I have full respect for those guys that played those roles.
And it was cool how you got to experience both sides of it, as you said. When you came in, it was still a little old school, and then now you get the new school mentality.
Yeah, totally different game, and the training's become a big part of it because there's just so much skating in the game now, and there's so much parity on the physical side. So, Yeah, it's been cool to see the differences there.
Well, I'm excited to be business partners with you. CaniBrands is the company that we're starting. How long do you think before we're able to actually launch these recovery drinks and stuff? Probably a good 6 months.
I think that, from my understanding, the way the industry is going is, everything's the sooner the better because there's just so much demand there. But I think, in working with the people at CaniBrands, I've noticed they've been pretty careful. They want to do it properly. Quality is a big piece for them. Getting the right formulation, getting the right products. So, but they've got such a wide variety of products. They cover everything. If you want it in a balm, if you want it in a spray. I mean, that's the big thing is not everybody likes to take a capsule. Some people like the tincture. So there's just so many different varieties. So I like the way that they're launching a wide variety of ways in which you can use it, different doses. So I think that's been one of the real strong points of the brand.
Yeah, they'll be advertising on the podcast from here on out, and we'll make sure to let you guys know about all these awesome products that they launch. We'll have an Instagram page. They'll be able to answer all your questions on Twitter, and maybe we'll even see a few modeling shots from Andy. Maybe a couple shirtless pics like Ed Belfour or what?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm a model. I'm not. I'm actually. This is a cool show for me because everyone used to always tell me I have a face for radio. So that's
Buddy, I've been getting that since I started.
That's awesome.
All right, awesome. Thank you for coming, and that's pretty much wraps things up.